Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen,
Hey.
to the second part of the discussion of 1984. If you haven't seen part one, I suggest you go back for 2 hours worth of context.
I mean, whatever. It's
but
up
yeah,
to
if you want to press
You wanna
forward,
just jump in.
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But obviously, yeah, let's do it.
You know what's weird is as soon as the show starts, I find it weird to look straight at you.
Did you take your glasses off?
I did.
Is that why? Because am
No.
I blurry?
No.
What letter am I making with my hands?
That's an O. Arguably a Q if you feel like it.
I don't even know what.
Actually, it looks more like a lemon from here.
It's
The fingers are part of it. I mean, that's like a 6 backwards.
It was supposed to be an A.
We're doing visual cues in the first couple seconds of a podcast. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the dystopian future of George Orwell.
Yes, this we've already covered a little bit about it. We've covered all the creepy stuff. We've covered what Winston does. He spreads propaganda, but not intentionally.
Winston, yes.
Winston Smith.
That's the name of the ape from Overwatch.
Oh, from Overwatch. I thought you were gonna say Planet of the Apes. I was gonna call bullshit.
No,
on that.
I don't think. I
I
don't
don't remember what
know.
his name is, but
Caesar.
it's not Winston. Caesar. Good call.
Have you seen trailers for the Woody Harrelson one?
Isn't that just the third installment?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I'm loving this trend of using a different main actor for each iteration of the story.
Oh yeah, Franco, Oldman, and then who did you say was gonna
Well,
be?
Oldman was like a.
He was the main character.
There was another guy who was more of the main character,
He
and then
killed
now
it, though.
Woody Harrelson's the main character. So you have 3 different protagonists throughout the story within one similar world.
And then who gets to be the guy that goes, "Damn you! You blew it up! You blew it all to hell!" Oh no, damn you all to hell!
No, because these are like really far back prequels.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. If they keep making movies, eventually they'll get to
Oh,
like 1,000 years from now.
Yeah, but they've already made a reference to that with Draco Malfoy.
Oh right, he was in it.
I'm
I forgot
sorry.
about that. Tom Felton.
Tom Felton.
Don't be so insensitive.
Dude, that's one of the guys that was in the original Learning Actors' Names
Oh really?
that I did. Yeah.
Oh, that's
And I
so
was
funny.
like,
How dare you? Then?
This is not Draco Malfoy.
Okay, so back to the dystopia world.
No, I think we should stick
It's
to.
the same. It's the same idea though.
Interesting. I didn't even intend on bringing up a dystopian story.
Different dystopia,
I just
yeah.
really wanted to talk about Woody Harrelson because I
Just
love.
how-
He's just killing it.
Just how it went. So we've covered who Winston Smith is and where he is. And you remember that dark-haired girl I mentioned very arbitrarily, who was sitting behind him in the 2-minute hate?
Right. The 2-minute hate. I haven't
Yeah.
thought about this like since we left. Although I've been boasting about this podcast. Because I'm telling people, I'm like, my brother is really pushing like on like he's so into this channel. Like so much that he's so ambitious he's come up with a podcast. And then now he's trying a 3-part, 6-hour discussion about 1984. Like
When you put it like that, it's pretty aggressive.
That's ambitious, man. That's what it is. Like to put that forward and to be like, yo, I got this idea and I really care about it and I want to do it.
And I spent 2 months writing just the notes. And then we're spending 3 weeks recording because we can't do it all at once.
Yeah.
So
if you crush this entire 3-parter in one day, just know it took 3 weeks to just record.
Yeah, and then there's all the other work that goes into
Yeah.
producing it. And
Did you read
such.
this before? Or was this just an interesting idea? You just thought, I'll check this out.
Everyone talks about 1984, so it was one of those things that I kind of felt like I had to read.
I've wanted to know about it for like 2 years.
And I don't know much about George Orwell.
Mm.
So that was part of it too. I wanted to read Animal Farm because you had read it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. And then 1984 because it's in everything.
Is there a movie? I don't think I've ever heard of a 1984 movie. But most of the classics have been made into movies.
Yeah, that's the thing. When a movie's made in the 60s, you don't really hear about it, right?
Have you seen the original Lord of the Rings animated?
Oh,
It's
I've
hilarious.
seen screenshots, but no, I haven't actually seen it.
They filmed real people and then they animated over those people.
It's kind
of gross.
that's weird, yeah.
In some cases, it's cool. Like,
But
it
in
works really well in
others-
some cases, but most of the time it is goofy as
Yeah.
fuck. Like, you'd expect it to work out. Like, what was that really weird movie that we saw when we were kids? And it's like, there's that one dude walking down the stairs, and there's another dude walking down the stairs, but he's walking...
Oh, the tune.
The tune.
Yeah.
Yes, he's walking on the side of the stairs as though the gravity is going in a different direction.
Yeah, so the one guy's walking down the stairs, but instead of walking down on the flat parts, he's walking on like the back
The verticals,
of the stairs. Yeah, the verticals, that's it. Yeah, the tune. And then
that,
he
like-
goes to a town called Flooby Nooby.
Oh, we gotta watch that.
We should watch that movie.
We should do an discussion on that.
It was a very trippy movie, even
Yeah.
though it was like it was family friendly and psychedelic, which is not common.
And yeah, and a thing they did with that was intentionally off form. I think it's called on form or on something. It's like an animation term where you're making sure that every single frame always keeps the same proportions for characters.
Okay.
And that was intentionally off form because even in still frames, things were moving.
Yeah,
because
the
it was
characters'
like
features, yeah.
It was like pencil crayon drawings. It was amazing. But you'd expect that Lord of the Rings to like have that impact. I think that's what the intention was.
It was just creepy.
It's kind of gross. It's kind of gross.
So this girl is alluded to a lot more in the story than I talked about her, because I only mentioned her at the 2-minute hate, and then Winston was going to smash her head in with the
with a rock
paperweight,
or something?
the paperweight that he bought at the shop. So one day he's walking down the hallway and he sees this girl walking the other way. She's got a cast on her arm.
Oh no!
And she works in some area where there's like large equipment that would be pretty easy to crush your arm in. So he imagines taking her cast and beating her head in with it. Yeah, well, while it's attached to her, stop hitting yourself.
Yeah.
Stop casting yourself.
He's like, I don't know, she was just crazy. She just started smashing herself in the face with her cast. Said something about Big Brother.
She said down with Big Brother. I don't know what the fuck
she was
that
like,
was
fuck
about.
the 2-minute hate. I love that 2-minute love.
And then she just screamed Goldstein's name before she died. I don't know what that was. It was weird. So he's walking.
Freedom!
He's walking towards her, and then she trips in front of him. And so instinctively, he kind of goes to help her up, and she slips a note in his hand.
Oh, shit.
But it's one of those things where, like, you know how you don't want to read.
Slick.
You don't want to read the note while the teacher could see you. So he just, like, holds it tight in his hand, like keeps it nice and closed. He goes back to his desk. He throws it, like, under some other pages. Because he doesn't want anyone to see or to know.
And this is the world where you can get in trouble because someone else slipped you a note.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you didn't report them.
Mm-hmm.
So he finally gets back to his desk, and he opens up the note, and it says, "I love you." And that's it. That's all it says.
What?
Well, you have to imagine if you're sending a note to someone, you have to make it impactful, I guess.
So the intention is to intrigue, not to send a message.
Exactly. It doesn't actually mean that, but the idea is not like, hey, let's meet up somewhere. Like, you sound like a cop when you say that.
Maybe the intention was that, like, I don't know who this guy is, so maybe if he's gonna, like turn me in, that it
sounds
for
better.
Nothing.
Yeah, well, also, if the thought police read, like, I love you, it's weird, but it's not as bad as, like, hey, let's do this thing.
Dark alley.
Yeah, let's meet somewhere. So he can't really figure out if she's thought police still, because this could be a trap, right? I mean, nothing in the world is real, so theoretically she could just be a pawn in this whole thing.
Classic Admiral Akbar.
Admiral Akbar?
he's that fish head from Star Wars. It's a trap.
Is he really?
Yeah.
I barely even know that.
I'm pretty sure that's his name.
It's a trap. I don't know.
You don't know that guy?
No, not really.
Like
I'm not that familiar with the originals.
It's a big meme. It's a whole meme thing.
I probably know it from that. That's probably
it's like a text message where like a girl asks her boyfriend some like baity question, and then somebody like puts in like it's a trap.
But I thought Han Solo said that. Did he not? I thought they were in the worm.
And no, because this
wasn't there.
No, it's a trap was like a battle.
But didn't it's a trap? No, it's a trap was the intro words, wasn't it? Like when Star Wars started, like in one of the movies when it starts, the first words I thought were "It's a trap." No, that's Blue Harvest.
Yeah,
that's why Blue Harvest starts with "It's a trap." Okay. Okay. Anyways. So he knows that he has to somehow talk to her. Clearly, that was her making first contact.
Right.
So he spends days thinking about like how they might be able to meet, because no one can know, right? They can't. And there's no cell phones. There's no computers. There's no way that there's no mail system.
Oh.
There's no way that they could interpersonally meet without actually talking to each other.
There's no Twitter DMs.
No.
He can't hit you up on the DMs.
No. There's no Snapchat. There's no Tinder. There's no way for them to get connected.
By the way, hit us up on the DMs.
Sure. Do we have an account?
Hey, large. Of course we do.
What's our Twitter handle?
At Super Not Cool BS.
Right.
Because somebody had Super Not Cool, unfortunately.
Which makes sense. I mean, someone's going to grab it, right? It's kind of like when you play a game that's been out for 6 years, you expect all the good screen names to be used up.
And then you see someone like Concocula, and you're like, hey, nice name.
And then there's Alucard.
That's not dude.
That's his son, right?
That's Dracula's son.
Yeah, Dracula's son.
But I think it's Castlevania.
Have you seen the show Castlevania?
I was going to, but it seemed,
dude,
anime is so unnecessarily exaggerated. Is it good?
So good.
Okay.
It's violent though.
I'll check it out.
Like, I would not recommend it for kids. It's not that kind of animated show.
See, I was checking it out. Like, you have about 15 minutes. I'll give you 15 minutes. And if you don't capture me, then I'm gone.
I'm going to give you like a 10-second thing so we can go back to this.
Not you. I mean,
the show.
Like I went and checked out Trevor Wilson, or Trevor Wilson. He's a stand-up comedian. He is one of the main characters on Letterkenny.
Okay.
And I'm like, I'll give you 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, I'm like,
good.
This is not what I'm interested in. I think he's certainly got an audience.
So did you watch the first 15 minutes of Castlevania?
No. See, I watched 5 minutes because I was enjoying the first part, and then she walks up to a door that is about 50 fucking stories tall. And as she walks up to it, she looks up and goes, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You didn't notice that shit? You were walking towards it. Anyway, so that was where I had to stop.
I suppose so, but you also have to remember the fact that you're watching something animated for the first time is already throwing you off. So you're kind of just looking for an excuse.
No, I love animated. Archer's one of my favorite shows. BoJack Horseman's one of my favorite shows.
That's a good point.
It's just like I don't like unbelievable characters.
But also, those two things are comedies. This is supposed to be a drama done animated.
That's what
very
I mean.
Different.
They broke the dramatic tension by having this character who acted surprised to see a door that's really fucking big.
I don't know. I mean, it's like the Gates of Hell, that piece of art. You look at it in a picture and you're like, well, that's not shit. But you stand in front of it.
She walked up like 50 stairs. Like, it was there the whole time.
I get that, but imagine seeing something off in the distance, like a big rock, and then you walk up to it, and it's like 10 times your height.
I would, that's the thing. I don't have a problem with her remarking. The issue is that instead of being like, wow, or whoa, she went, or something like that, like surprise. Like she didn't know she was. It just feels like...
So you got to give it 15 minutes is what you're saying.
Yes, it feels like someone wrote on the English version, if this was overdubbed, on the script, they were like, astonishment, and then the voice actor just did a bunch of things, and then the guy putting it together was like...
But also what you're not recognizing is that is the lead up to how the story begins. That's not part of the story even. So that's like... I
figured.
You know, that's the section of like the first cinematic in a game is always brilliant, and then everything after that is very different. But either way, it's only 4 23-minute episodes. I noticed such a low investment.
Yeah, it is.
Anyways, that's where Alucard comes from. And all these names. So he decides the best place that he can meet this girl is going to be in the canteen, that grimy, slippery little place. But that means that he has to find a way for them to be alone in a place where everyone eats lunch. So that obviously is hard to do. And during this time, he doesn't even use his diary. Like, he has no interest because all of his attention is focused on how he can make contact with this girl.
Right.
They later go into... She's probably like 23-ish, and he's 39. Just to give you some perspective of what they're like.
Okay.
But she's young.
What's it called when an older man goes after a younger woman? Are they called panthers?
I know. I was trying to think of another word for cougar. Like, they'd be mountain lions, maybe. Oh, Jesus, when you put it like that. So he's still doubting whether or not she's even thought police. Like, he knows making contact with her could screw him over, but it's kind of like the O'Brien thing. It doesn't matter if she's a friend or an enemy. He has to find out.
Is doubting like D-O-U-B-T-I-N-G? But D-O-W-D-I-N-G. Isn't doubting a thing? You never heard of that?
No.
Okay, fine.
Go doubting?
Back to your thing.
I've never heard of doubting, no.
Okay, all right.
Is that a person's name?
No.
I know there's a guy named Michael Dowd.
That could be it.
If you were doubting people, you'd probably be stealing all their drug money.
Oh, that was Michael Dowd?
Yeah. Dowd. Yeah, well, that's not like him in a nutshell, but that's something he did. That's where... I guess all his fame comes from. Or his infamy.
Infamy?
Yeah, that's where his infamy comes from.
Hugh Dowding? Doubting System?
Doubting System? You talking about dowries, bro?
Ground control interception network. Interesting.
Ground control interception.
Have you heard that whole song?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
Ground Control
good.
to Major Tom?
But,
Everyone loves that song. Well, not everyone loves that song.
His name is escaping me.
Elton John?
No, that's not Elton John.
Is it not?
Damn it. What's his name?
Who it's by? You're holding your cell phone. You just looked something up.
I just looked something up.
I thought it was by Elton John. Is it not?
I mean, maybe the original? I don't know.
Through the door,
Ground control.
and I'm... Does he say I'm floating in a most particular way?
Peculiar, yeah.
In a most peculiar way.
I'm so sorry to fans of this
book
artist. David Bowie.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes more sense.
He is so good. I spent an afternoon listening to David Bowie. Unfortunately, like most like great people, it takes something bad happening for me to find out like more about them. So when he passed away, Spotify was doing like David Bowie playlists, like greatest stuff, and I'm like, oh, check him out. I'm like, holy shit, this guy was good. Like,
yeah,
he just consistently killed it. Just knocked them like one after another out of the park.
Yeah. What is it called? Strange Changes. Turn and face the strange changes.
Yeah.
What a killer.
Oh, I love him.
So he finally manages to meet her in the canteen. And this is what all their meetings are like when they're around other people. So he sees her alone at a table after like 3 or 4 days of being cockblocked, essentially. So he sits down at the table, not across from her, so maybe 2 places diagonal. And then they have conversations. They whisper to each other while eating so that it doesn't look like they're talking.
Oh, that sounds like a gross situation because they're both just like food in the mouth, and they're like.
Do you want me to go back and describe what this canteen is like? It's slimy. It smells like gin, coffee, and stew.
Is it loud in there?
Probably not.
Quiet.
It's relatively quiet, but there would still be that hum of voices.
Like
that
quiet like this room?
Not even close. We're in a recording studio, bro.
This is not a recording studio.
It is now.
There's like a 20-year-old duvet on the wall.
It's a recording room, okay?
Unintentionally, the couch that it's on its side is actually also partially blocking sound.
Yeah, it's true.
It's called sound treatment.
Not buffering.
I mean, isn't buffer like... Anyway.
So he finally meets with her, and then she basically gives him a simple instruction at the first time, which is meet me in Victory Square. Notice that Victory trend? Victory Coffee, Victory Mansions, Victory
Fries.
Gin. I don't think that... Maybe. But Victory Fries are a real thing, aren't they? That's like a real life thing.
I don't know.
Yeah, pretty sure Victory Fries are like at some sort of an American chain.
Victory Coffee is for closers.
No, Victory Coffee is for losers, actually. So they meet in Victory Square, and as they're trying to meet, this procession of prisoners from one of the other major superpowers is going through. Like, they're all captured prisoners. Obviously, Jesus Christ. The redundancy is real. So they're going by, and this crowd starts to gather such that Winston and this girl, whose name he finds out is Julia, they get pushed together by all these people because they have nowhere to go.
Nice.
So they're like pressed up against each other. I don't remember if they hold hands or not. I think
it's what every creepy guy is looking forward to.
Be
is
pressed
being
up
like,
against.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, in a crowd.
Pressed up against someone he's pushing up on.
So they're still only
able. Is that a correct term?
Pushing up on? No, it's not a correct term.
Trying to lay her down?
That's not a correct term either.
You said that to me one time, like 4 years ago.
What?
I was hanging out with this girl, and you're like, so you trying to lay her down, bro?
Really?
Yeah, I remember laughing at the time. I'm like,
4 years ago.
Yeah.
Must have been in university then.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. You definitely, there's a different lingo that comes along with the university lifestyle.
Well, we weren't really that, like, that was like the one time in our lives where we were not familiar with each other.
That's true,
You
actually.
had just left for university, and so we were only seeing each other on, like, breaks.
And we didn't have this yet.
So it was, like, superficial. It was, like, basic brotherly stuff, but not, like, expanded.
Like, hey, bro, you gonna lay her down?
Yeah, so you gonna lay her down or what? And I was like, oh my god. I have to tell her. Because she was just a friend.
Yeah.
I'm like, so the first thing my brother says when I said I'm like watching like Game of Thrones with you is, so you gonna lay her down?
Well, I mean, I lay her down so that she can watch Game of Thrones with me.
Of course. I mean, if there was space on the couch.
I give her a bed.
Exactly.
I mean, whatever. So when they're meeting in the town, she gives him very precise directions. So get on this train, follow it out to this stop, take a road a few miles out to a farm. When you're at the farm, follow it through these gates. And then once you go through the gates, like wait until you get to the woods.
Follow exact north for 17 meters.
Yeah, run for a year and you'll find me.
Meet a guy named... There you'll meet a guy named Greg. He'll have your coupons for you.
Yeah. Gonna go out to I-95, turn left. You're looking for a guy named Larry. He'll give you the burger. It's a Dane Cook reference. It's a weak Dane Cook reference, but it's there. So she gives him all these instructions of where to go. And the last thing Winston's thinking about is he wishes he knew what her eye color was, but he can't look at her. He's never looked at her right in the eye.
Oh,
because
it's
not how it works in this world, right? So he's imagining it, but he doesn't actually find out until they eventually go and meet.
Is George Orwell... I mean, I imagine based on the size of the book that he's probably a pretty good describer, right?
He's a very efficient describer of things.
He just goes straight for it. So does he, like... does he create good atmosphere through his words? Or is it a lot of like your imagination?
Well, both are required, obviously.
Well, yeah.
But he creates really good descriptions. That's why, especially as we get later and later in this book, I'm going to be reading you a lot of stuff. Because certain things are put so well in his own terms that it would actually be detrimental for me to try and explain it in a different way.
What I mean is, he never... you haven't told me anything about... Like, remember in part 1 I said, I imagine this entire thing is like dark skies all the time? That's me filling in information because
it's not there.
It's dystopian, so I imagine, well, it's probably not sunny and happy.
It's gloomy.
That's like me making that decision instead of him actually describing it.
I don't think he ever really describes the actual environment, like the landscape, the sky, that kind of stuff. Not
You're just
really.
Supposed to assume that
it's the emotional atmosphere.
Right.
That's in a way, the physical atmosphere isn't even really important. The emotional atmosphere is so oppressive that nothing else really exists to these people. But he does describe London as being pretty dreary, so I imagine they have smog. Like, I imagine it's not a very nice place, but...
Maybe he does this on purpose because the characters don't even get an opportunity to see this shit.
And they're taught not to.
That they're so, like, deep in a slummy version of London that they don't even see much of the landscape anyway.
Well, they go on community hikes and things like that.
Oh.
But the key is that they're so conditioned towards ignoring things that are not specifically laid out for them by the party, that they don't really absorb things the same way we would. They don't see all the sights and sounds.
Right.
Their brain just chunks data differently than ours do.
Have you ever seen that guy who brings inner city kids to like out into the forest?
And they're confused.
And they have never been outside of a major like metropolis. And he tweets the stuff that they say. So like
good.
In their world, is that joke from Fallout where like the guy lived his entire life underground in a vault. So he's like, that giant room you have out there is fantastic. It must be a bitch to replace that huge light bulb.
Yeah.
So they're saying shit like, fuck, I wish I knew that. Like in their world, it's like telephone poles. Like trees are like the nature's telephone poles. Like that's the way that they look at the world. Because the same way in this world, you establish whatever is in your environment. So if you grow up in a place with almost no grass, with more pavement than grass, and you go to a place that's all vegetation, it's like the reverse. It's like a giant garden we're in.
Yeah, exactly. It appears as though that's abnormal.
And it is for them.
But even though it's not as to nature, it is for their world.
Yeah.
So he goes out into the country to meet her. He takes these trains. He gets all the way out there. And he finally sees her eyes. And he tells her that before he knew that he had intended to murder and rape her.
Holy
he tells her
shit.
that, and she laughs because I guess she gets it. Like, she knows what it's like, right?
I was thinking, like, in his head, he's like, all right, be really soft about this. Compliment her on her eyes. You got this. Don't worry about it. And it just, like, zooms out, and he's just like, you have nice eyes!
I wanted to murder you!
I was gonna kill you, but your eyes are fantastic.
So when he gets to this property, he actually recognizes the property they meet on from a dream he had.
So he's premonition.
I don't know what the significance of that is, but that's like his dream of the golden country. He always dreams of this like beautiful, wonderful place, and it looks like that farm. It could be what's the opposite of deja vu?
Uvaj Eid?
No, it's not backwards. But yeah, there's definitely
the opposite of deja vu.
Yeah.
I think Vsauce has talked about this before.
Yeah, it's like je sais vu or something like that. I don't know what it's called.
So
but
that would be
the opposite. So deja vu is where something happens that reminds you of a memory, and the other way around is when you ascribe something seems unfamiliar that should be familiar.
Oh.
It seems unfamiliar even though you know you've been there before.
Oh.
It's harder to quantify than deja vu. Because deja vu is thinking you've been here before.
Could that be like
sense.
You're trying to recreate a feeling you had when you were a child by doing the same thing when you were a child and it didn't happen?
Yeah.
Like you play a video game and you're like, this was the
Happens-
shit when I was 8.
all the time.
Yeah.
I want to play games not because I want to play them, but because I want to get that feeling back.
Dude, that
whole row
the
of games.
entire row of games over here is PS2. Maybe 4 of them are as good as I thought they were.
Yeah, well, when you decide something's great as a kid,
yeah,
you never think about it again.
Standards, right? Like some games like Star Fox 64 is still fantastic.
It's easier for people to remember feelings than the actual
fuck yeah
physical details.
That's why 2016 was the year of remasters.
Because everyone forgot about the original
games.
games.
Nuts, dude. No, because they wanted the nostalgia.
That's true, and they wanted the nostalgia to look pretty.
You're like, we're talking about remasters of games that came out in 2014. Like, it's fucking stupid. Like, the technology hasn't grown that much.
Yeah, that's true. So when they're at this meeting, they're like, I mean, they do it in the forest because that's what they met for, essentially.
Right.
And this is actually, like, this is a weird concept. So he tells her, the more men you've been with, the more I love you. And the idea is that that is the ultimate affront to the party. Like, because the party is so intent on crushing the sexual instinct,
right,
that sexual acts are the greatest form of rebellion that exists in this world.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is actually where the term "a rebel from the waist down" comes from.
Really?
It was coined by this book. Because it means that you're not rebellious in the sense that you fight the rules, except when those rules relate to what's in your pants.
You fuck the rules.
You're a rebel from the waist down.
Where's that? That's in the
Marilyn
song.
Manson song.
A rebel from the waist down.
I don't know what song it is though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the song.
I like how Marilyn Manson talks about women.
I don't know how
it's
he talks
usually
about
like
women.
in a grandiose way. Like he usually talks about like a woman that's like trouble for him, but he's still interested.
That's how it always is, right?
Yeah.
That's how it always
like
is for everybody.
The,
you always want the thing that gives you the most trouble in the world.
What's that song where he says about like what we did with her prom dress or something like that? About like she knows that it's a bad decision to be with him on prom night, but it doesn't matter. Fuck the guy. I love that guy. I love that guy.
I do too. So then after this meeting, they start meeting periodically in just sort of random places. Like they'll meet in a back street and then just wander together. And they have what he calls lighthouse conversations or talking by installments.
All
where
right.
when they're walking, they can't be speaking to each other when other people are around. So they'll speak, and then as soon as either a patrol or whatever, anything else comes out,
They stop.
they stop talking, and they wait until they're past them, and then they start talking again.
It's like when there's a montage of people traveling while having a conversation, and you realize there's like 4 hours in between each scene.
Each conversation, yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of quietness.
Yeah.
So one day when they're like walking, so they pass by a patrol, and then they turn down like a direction to avoid the patrols, and then a rocket bomb goes off.
Fuck.
And so when he comes to, her face is just white, completely white from all the plaster,
Oh.
all the dust from the plaster, and it's just coating her face. She looks like a ghost. And the only reason he knows she's not dead is because she's still breathing.
And he whispers in her ear, "The more plaster you have, the more I want you."
You look like a doll. Yeah.
Like a perfect porcelain doll.
So after that, they go into this period where they're working like 60-plus hour work weeks plus community service that they have to do on top of that.
That's nuts.
But they also don't have any leisure time, so it's not like, you know, you imagine 60-hour work week sucks because you also have to like go home and take care of the kids and do all that shit. But in this world, like, you just go home, be miserable, and go to bed.
Right.
You don't have anything to fill your time, so the community service is not like the same as it would be in our world.
Yeah, it's kind of like when the power goes out here.
Yeah. Everything
just like,
goes down.
I might as well stay at work because there's nothing to do at home. Can't even make food.
So they meet in this old, bombed-out church. I think it's one of the churches from the rhyme I was mentioning, like the church, the Bells of St. or Oranges and Lemons say the Bells of St. Clements. I think this is one of the churches, one of the, like, founding churches of London.
Okay.
But it's been destroyed. And so they're meeting in this church, and she talks about, like, I guess, not liking her job, but she talks about the aspects of her job. So she works in porno section, which is where they produce pornography for the proletarians, like the common folk. They only allow women to work in the porno section because men are too affected by it. So,
I'm just imagining proletarian porn.
Dude, it gets better.
Where it's like this stupid reality thing where it's like, I can't pay for this pizza. And like someone shows up and they're like, we really want you to be part of the thought police. Oh, I don't know if I have any time for that. Is there anything I can make up to you?
Probably even...
And then they just like put her in prison and that's the end of it. There's like
There's
sex.
no sex involved, yeah.
It's like, don't have sex with people.
But for the proles that don't care, it's a way to keep the proles entertained. It's a way
Right.
to keep them, like, down.
Kind of like how American Idol has been on for so long.
Yeah.
It's about distracting you while someone's trying to
yeah.
put through, like, net neutrality laws and shit.
Ads, yeah. And so they call pornosec, they call it the muck house.
The muck house.
Yeah, which I think is great.
That perfectly lines up with mucker barn and muckluck.
Muckluck?
That was something you said to me.
It's just a funny sounding word, though.
Words that sound dirty but aren't.
aren't. Dude, muck house sounds very dirty and is dirty. That's not an isn't.
Well, muck is like, it's like mud and dirt, but more stuff. Like twigs.
Yeah,
and like,
and just...
for some reason, like particle board and, I don't know, erasers.
It's not good.
Rubber.
That's for sure. But straw. Like,
he fell in the muck.
So she tells him a bit about, like, her history. So her first sexual affair was at 16. And then... So the guy that it was with committed suicide. And that's the only reason she didn't get turned in. Is because... You know, you can't interrogate someone who committed suicide.
Sorry, she was 16?
Yes. And I don't know. We don't know how old the dude was. But I guess instead of getting captured, that was his solution.
Right.
So she's talking about why they do it. And she says that the whole reason that they try and suppress the sexual instinct is because it makes people more controllable, which is good. But it also produces this buildup of energy, which leads to hysteria. And that hysteria can be pointed at war, it can be pointed at the non-existent brotherhood, it can be pointed wherever you want.
Yeah.
So not only does it allow people to be controlled by the party, it makes people unnerved all the time. It makes people really agitated and really easy to prod into frenzy.
Oh, sex is such a strong impulse that you can still put sexual images in a YouTube video thumbnail, even though you know there is no nudity in that video.
Yeah.
Like, you still, like, want to click on it, because it's, like, even in the corner, there's times where I see something, I'm like, whoa! And I'm like, oh, no, that's clickbait.
It's clickbait,
Run YouTube. This is not...
It is so hard to resist clickbait, because this is part of your mind that goes, what if?
Yep.
You know those, like, $1 million giveaways? Sometimes you'll see one and you're like, God damn, this looks so convincing. I wish I was stupid, but I'm just not.
I watch a lot of Siege videos, so they promote a lot of Siege videos to me. And one of them says, this is what 1,000 hours of Kavera experience looks like. Kavera's an operator. And I'm thinking, 1,000 hours. And I'm doing all the math on it, doing all this shit, and I'm like, there's no fucking way you have 1,000 hours on that. I'm like, I should just click no. No. This is what he wants.
That's why.
Either you don't think about it and you think 1,000 hours of experience with one operator must look pretty good. Or you're saying, like, I wonder if he shows it to us, because there's, like, stats that you can show of each individual one. I'm like, I wonder if I'm like, that's what he wants from
Either
me.
way, yeah.
He's trying to get me to do it.
Yeah, goddamn, I have no time for that.
I do, but but there's just other things I can watch that are just legit content that doesn't, that, like, where someone writes, like, exactly what they show you.
Yeah, and that's the problem with this whole world, is that there's only one source of anything. Right?
But yeah, if you only have one window to look at, it's...
So when you add together all these things that happen to these people, there's the hysteria that comes from the repression. There's the fact that everyone is a spy. So you're constantly surrounded by informants that might tell on you. It's similar in countries like North Korea, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like that's an unheard of thing. There's lots of modern allegories for that.
Well, a lot of what you're saying is feeling tangential, or parallel, to North Korea. Have you listened to the Joe podcast with the guy who went there? Or the guy who has studied it pretty hard? They have these weekly meetups where everyone is expected in, like, this pod of people to rat out shit that other people have done, and you better have something to rat somebody out on.
Really?
Which means that rebellion is almost impossible, because anything you decide to choose to discuss, even in, like, passing, someone's going to be like, I saw these two talking, and it doesn't look like...
And then I heard the mention of whatever.
Yeah, like...
Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that, which obviously, imagine how stressful that is.
Yeah.
And then Winston tells her the story about his wife and about how he could have pushed her off the cliff. And so the way it all turned out is that there was a flower where one of the branches was a different color from all the rest of the branches. So it had different flowers on it, but it was one plant. And so he had her, like, lean over the edge to look at it. And that's when he was thinking, could just push her off. And he says he didn't regret not doing it, but he recognizes that doing it would have been less bad than not pushing her off.
Right.
So it's like, it's not like he's heartbroken. He's not like, God damn, I wished I pushed that bitch off. But he knows, like, it would have saved him, a couple months of dealing with her.
Right.
So it's one of those weird things where he just feels kind of empty about it. He doesn't feel any real passion. Like, he was so uninterested in his wife, he doesn't even care about killing her.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't even register.
See, this Winston guy, I know he's supposed to be the protagonist, but he's kind of a dick.
I don't know about that, because I think he is... So they keep referring to him as a lunatic because he's a minority of one. He's the only person in this world that believes that reality is real. Because reality, to everyone else, isn't real. Reality is what we call it.
Right.
But to Winston, reality is this unchangeable thing outside of our own heads.
Which is what he's after.
Exactly. So for Winston... imagine being around someone who is so indoctrinated into something. Like, imagine you were married to a Jehovah's Witness, a rigid Jehovah's Witness who never strayed from the tenets.
Right.
It would be hell because you're so incompatible.
Right.
That's the key.
If you weren't Jehovah's Witness, or you were of a different religion.
Scientologist. Someone who's in something so deep that there's no coming back. Like, all their energy and thoughts go to that one thing, and you don't agree with it.
Yeah, when I was young, I went to church with a friend, and his family was very religious. And there was a discussion, and the discussion was, could you ever date someone who was not a Christian? And in my head, I was like, of course. Like, why? Like, what's the issue? And the more I heard from people, the more it made sense. Like, the more I understood that even if I didn't necessarily agree with the religion, that I completely agree with their issue with that. If you're going to be going to church every week and you believe in it hard, and you have somebody who just doesn't, that's it's kind of like if I dated somebody who was actually put off by video games. Like, I'm so into it that I can't just be like, what'd you do today? Nothing?
Yeah.
It's like, Like if you need
seriously.
to discuss like if you're going to church once a week, then it's important enough to you. It's probably something you want to discuss.
For sure.
Probably something you want to say, like, at work I was told to do this thing, and it's legal, but I feel like it goes against my religion. And you want to discuss that with the most important person in your life, which is your wife.
They'd better be comfortable
and she's
with
just
it.
like, I don't care
about your religion.
about anything like that. Like, it almost seems like a disrespectful thing to do to yourself.
And to the other person. Well, Chris Rock put it best. He said, you have to be into the same shit.
Yeah.
Because you can't have one person coming home and saying, oh, I'm going to Bible class. Like, what are you going to do? Buying a pipe? It just doesn't work. But two crackheads can stay together forever.
I love how, like, minus the Chris Rock way he presents it, that is still funny.
Yeah.
It's still fun. Fuck, that guy is funny.
Yeah, it was a great premise. And this is the idea that he was put with someone who wasn't even partly compatible. He wasn't, and that's what the party does. That's the point. Right? They want to put you with someone who's going to force you into this tiny little box. So essentially, Winston is a character who is constantly exploding from all of the bottling that has happened in his life.
That's a very common thing, that people blame someone else for breaking up with them. Like, look what they did to me.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, if you care about somebody, then it sucks when they don't care about you back. But I think what it ends up being is not like, this guy does this thing or she does that thing. It's more of an incompatibility thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have the same interests. We don't have the same styles. We don't have the same actions and thoughts.
And the best thing to do is it's best for both of you. It's kind of tough. Like, I know people who have been in, like, really long relationships, and they're trying to adjust to not being to being on their own. I was actually talking to a buddy last night, and he's telling me about this girl he's seeing, and I'm like, man, it's been like 4 years since I was with somebody, and I think it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me.
You get a lot of clarity.
Yeah, and something I said to him last night was like, I'm like, have you figured yourself out? And he's like, I think so. And I'm like, that's a good start.
But you got to know so.
Because most people don't.
That's true.
Most people don't even know what they want. But they expect to somehow make it work with someone else who actually probably doesn't know what they want as well. That's why I'm so impressed with, like, 50-year-old people who say that they're with their high school sweetheart, because you made it through that. Like, 20 to 30 is like one of the biggest changes
in your entire life
of who you are as a person.
Seriously,
so
from high school, even just from high school to the end of university.
Oh, shit, yeah. But, like, in your 20s, like Dan Evidence said it best, in your 20s, you basically reinvent yourself every 6 months.
Yeah, that sounds pretty
if you're
reasonable,
reinventing yourself 20 times
with another person
in a decade, and they're reinventing themselves, it's like if you were playing video games with a friend all the time, and one of you started to enjoy MMOs, one of you started to enjoy multiplayer shooters, but you still got on Skype to talk to each other while you did the same thing. Like, you can go in different directions. The important part
is staying together.
Is that you're with each other, and that's what you like.
And that's actually evident in here, because Julia and Winston don't always agree either. But the difference is that they disagree on things for reasons. His old wife...
It's not contrarian.
Well, his old wife was essentially just like, because the party. And
right.
You can't really talk to that. So Julia always rejects this one idea that Winston has throughout the whole story. Winston's idea is that he's already dead. He is a corpse walking who will eventually be caught by the police and killed.
He's the Walking Dead.
Yes. We talked about this in the last episode. You made that same joke.
Did I? I didn't say... No.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I didn't make the Walking Dead joke.
I think so.
I don't remember that.
It'd be funny if you did.
I would have been pretty proud of myself.
But anyways, she completely rejects that idea. Because to her, it's not, you're not dead until you're dead. You're not captured until you're captured.
Right.
Like, this is real life. But to Winston, this is really just a kind of dream that comes before death. It's like purgatory almost. So it's possible to disagree and get along. But when your disagreements are massive, like you just couldn't have like a Palestinian and a Jewish person together if they were both rigid to their faiths, because their faiths don't mix. In this case, his faith is that reality is a thing, and her faith is that the party knows best. And those faiths do not mix.
So
this is his old wife, Catherine.
Right. And they separated how long ago?
I don't know, actually. They were together for 18 months, and I think a couple of years earlier.
Right. Or we're laughing about the 18 months part.
Well, they were married for all 18 of those months, because it's not like, oh, we get together, we like each other enough, we're going to get married.
Oh, they just got married straight away.
Pretty sure it's arranged by the party.
Oh.
Yeah, it's creepy, right? You hear like a dog or something?
Yeah. I live across from a veterinarian place, so you kind of hear dogs.
It sounded like a ghost first, though.
Ooh.
So if you guys heard that on the mic, it's not a ghost in your house.
I
it's
don't
a ghost
think they did.
in my house.
If they can't hear the apartment upstairs, they probably can't hear that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So Winston finally gives in at this point.
Well, now, hold on. We should go back to talking about things no one can hear. Okay, I'm going to do a visual joke.
So he finally caves and buys that room that Mr. Charrington, the shop owner, offered to him.
Yes.
Because, like I said, he already knows he's dead. So to him, it doesn't matter. Any risk, it doesn't really matter that much. So he rents the room, and Juliet shows up with a whole bunch of contraband. She brings, what does she bring? Like coffee, she brings makeup, she brings all these things you're really not supposed to have. And it's sort of adding, like, they're essentially building the evidence against themselves, right? Now they have a physical room and a bunch of contraband that they can be caught with.
I suppose it's like in for a penny, I suppose, is the situation they're in.
Kinda, yeah, because the thought police can take you in for whatever. There are no rules. It's not like 5 years for this, 10 years for that.
See, this brings me to an interesting point. A boss, when they're a complete dick and there's no rule, like there's no system for what they tell people not to do, then people just start breaking rules because there are no rules. Like if you get yelled at for something that isn't your fault, you start to rebel by just doing whatever you feel like.
Because you're going to get in trouble no matter what.
It doesn't matter. It's just an important PSA that people need to understand that you are firm but fair in a management role.
But they're not trying to be firm but fair.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Exactly.
They're pushing people over. Like the
party does it intentionally, but managers do it inadvertently.
Right.
They don't even realize that they're getting less out of their subjects.
Yeah.
Subjects.
Well,
subordinates.
Actually, subjects is pretty accurate from what I've seen. But I think fuck, what was I saying? I forget. Go ahead.
Okay. So when they're in the room, a rat like runs from under the bed into a hole in the wall, and Winston totally hates rats. So Julia deals with it, which I thought was kind of cool, kind of reversed roles.
Like with a pan? The pan that she fought over?
No, she didn't fight over the pan. That was the proles.
Oh.
Yeah, you need your notes, bro. So she just like essentially kicks something into the hole so that they don't come back out. And she comes up with another line in that rhyme. So it's oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clemens. When will you pay me, says the bells of Old Bailey. And it keeps going. There'll be more. Old Bailey. I don't know which church they were in. I still don't remember that.
Isn't that a bell from what's it called? National Treasure? Isn't that the Old Bailey?
Well, in V for Vendetta, they blow up the Old Bailey.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, because the Bailey is blown up in the very first
yeah.
scene, pretty much. Like the first major scene.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
That's a good movie. I would love to do a discussion of V for Vendetta.
Love V for Vendetta.
We'll get there one day.
That's Hugo Weaving's crowning... No, I'm joking.
So at this point, Seam, the guy who was the new speak guy, the guy who was working on the dictionaries, the guy who was too smart for his own good.
Yeah.
So this is when he disappears. So I told you he was going to get vaporized, and he got vaporized at somewhere around this point.
Vaporized.
So also, rocket bombs have become more and more frequent. Like, just they've been increasing in their...
Why are they called rocket bombs?
Because he didn't have a word for missile.
Oh.
Right? It's 1945 when he wrote this.
Oh.
So think about words like telescreen, rocket bomb. All these things are his best idea. Speak right.
Wow.
His best idea of where technology is going to go.
I keep forgetting that this was written like 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So if it was written in 45, that would be 70 years ago, 73 years.
Wow.
Yeah. That's when it was finished.
You were just telling me this morning about how you spent a road trip mostly listening to music from the 70s. And we're sitting here talking about a book written 70 years ago.
But this is probably one of the most timeless books I've ever written in my entire life. Read in my life.
That's a great example.
That would be amazing. Come read my book, 1984. I have a book signing in Toronto next week.
Under the alias George Orwell.
Yeah, under the it's his alias too.
It's
not his real name.
Whoa.
I don't know what his real name is.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's an alias. Eric Arthur Blair.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. But what a great example of something I mentioned first on Arkham City of all the playthroughs. Probably one of my least favorite playthroughs in recent times. That it's about being good, period. Not good for its time. And like, I don't know how many books George Orwell wrote, but there may be one in there that is just good for its time. Just good for 1947 or whatever.
Yeah, I haven't read Burmese Days, which is one of his first ones. I think he wrote that in 37. I want to read the rest eventually. I don't know if we'll discuss them all, but I believe that. It's the same way no artist is flawless in all their music.
No.
Even an artist like AC/DC, who is incredibly prolific and most of their songs are world famous, they have an album or two that were just kind of okay, right?
Yeah, I think Pink Floyd has so many more albums than I thought they had.
Yeah.
I haven't checked it all out, but I'm positive that they like not every single one of their tracks is.
How many is it? 9 or 13 or something like that?
I remember thinking
crazy amount of albums.
I think they made albums into the late 2000s.
Have you seen that picture homage to all the Pink Floyd albums where it's all the women sitting side by side and they have the album covers painted on their backs?
Yeah.
That one's really cool.
I like that one.
That's a good homage. So the rocket bombs are increasing, and sometimes they'll hear these massive explosions in the distance. Now think about this. This is not them near a war zone. This is them in their city, London.
Yeah.
And they're just hearing explosions off in the distance. Imagine how unnerved you would be if you heard an explosion, saw smoke, and then that was it. Life just went on as normal.
You just went back to normal. What are you going to do about it?
And you just hope the next explosion isn't where you're standing.
Yeah. Well, he's pulling from the real world there because London was actually bombed during World War II.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least near it. But
it was bombed.
Yeah, there were regular bombing sirens in London.
Air raid warnings.
Yeah, during, I guess, the war. But there's a whole Doctor Who episode about it. About kids who, poorer children, who wait for air raids and then run into rich people's houses.
Rob them,
and eat their food and rob them.
Eat their food. Well, you know what? That's actually super clever when you think about it.
He even says it. He says, well, aren't you a clever one? Actually, no, it was Michael Eccleston, so it was more like, aren't you a clever one?
Close enough.
I mean, that's not good, but it's better than the first one, right?
I heard someone describing firsthand what it was like when an air raid went off, and he said, there's an alarm that goes, and you know what it means, but that's not the loudest sound. The loudest sound is when the anti-air weapons fire up. Because imagine a sound 100 times louder than a shotgun, and there's 3 of them.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
But isn't it fire like bop, like brap,
exactly?
Brap.
That's the thing. But you can't even hear the difference between the bullets.
It's
so oppressive.
loud.
Yeah.
It's like one giant noise.
Exactly. It just sounds like a long firing sound.
It's like being in a huge cafeteria. Like you don't hear any individual people.
You
it's
just hear
kind of like a roll.
Yeah, in the background. So Hate Week is coming up, and the increasings and the bombings are stirring unrest in the people. That's part of my theory of why the government is likely bombing the people.
Yeah,
because
to maintain.
Why would the bombing increase right before Hate Week, other than the government's doing it to
absolutely.
Generate shit for Hate Week? So 300 people died in a theater explosion, including dozens of children who died. No, sorry. And then in a separate incident, dozens of children died at a park in an explosion.
Fuck.
There was burnings of an effigy of Goldstein. The soldiers' posters for Hate Week, like these massive posters of soldiers from another country were posted. And so people were ripping them down and burning them. And there was just these massive frenzies.
This guy's fucking brilliant.
An old couple who was suspected of being spies were burned alive in their home.
Holy shit.
So Hate Week, it gets very out of hand, and it's intentional. Like it's almost like The Purge, where they're trying to reduce the population.
Yeah.
Is that what that is? No,
it's kind of a spoiler.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I caught you there because I almost said it too in the last part. Yeah, okay. Good movie though.
Essentially like The Purge, though.
Can I say for a moment how
Yeah.
fucking brilliant this guy is?
George Orwell?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the things that you're saying here have lined up with things I've seen in the past in the 2000s. Do you remember? I think it was Bowling for Columbine, because it's a documentary all about gun control and gun violence in America, and there's a story that in the States, a little boy took a gun to school and shot and killed like another like 7-year-old girl in the middle of class, and they did a story on it. Like the news did a story on it, and there's this weird giddiness from the guy covering the story.
Ugh.
On the way, like they end the piece with a balloon floating up into the sky, and that's how it ends. And he's talking about putting it together, and he seems like genuinely enjoying how much he is pulling on heartstrings.
If it bleeds,
it leads. Exactly. But it's like, it's one thing to say that a lot of people died. It's a completely different story when you say a lot of kids died.
Yeah.
Because very few people in the world have a way of justifying it. That's what a lot of the news is all about. It's like the classic thing I always tell you, where it's like, 17-year-old died, and you're like, oh no, he was a drug dealer. Oh, well, I guess he put himself in that situation.
Yeah.
When you're like, a child died, no one says that.
They put it.
Everyone's like, fuck. And that's what most like ignorance is all about, is making sure that you don't feel guilt. And then when you hear about children dying, it's guilt. There's no way to get around it. There's no way for you to say like, well, I mean,
they deserved it.
He should have understood how to deal with it.
But at the same time, there will be some people that'll be like, yeah, well, he deserved it because he was an X. Right? There will be people who do that. They'll be like,
an X?
He whatever you want to describe them as. Like,
well,
he was a Muslim, or he was a Christian, he was a black man. Like, people will just put them in a group and be like, yeah, they were a kid, but they were part of this evil.
I mean, it's their job to get shot at. It's like,
well, it's almost like if a puppy were to die and it's a poodle, there's no excuses. But if it were a pit bull, you'd be like, it was gonna grow up to be a monster, right? Like, people like to do that. They like to say, well, it was a kid, but that kid would have grown up to be horrible.
Oh yeah, it was a rich school.
It was a bad kid.
It was like he was gonna be he was gonna grow up to be
a banker.
He was gonna be one of the big brothers. The Protest the Hero has a whole song about pit bulls.
Really?
Because I think in Canada, or at least at the time, they had some pretty rigid pit bull rules. Yeah. He doesn't even have a pit bull. That's what I appreciate it. He said you can rip them out of my, if they're a weapon, then you can rip them out of my cold dead hands.
So now that Winston's with somebody, sort of, his health starts to return because he's not as lonely, and that makes a big difference. It really does. Like, people's health is really affected by that. So they discuss rebellion. They discuss O'Brien and the little tiny signs that Winston thinks he's seen. So this is where Julia actually starts to think that the rocket bombs are friendly fire from the government. She starts suggesting that to Winston. And the weird thing is that she doesn't remember that they once were at war with East Asia. Because 4 years before this story, they were at war with East Asia. And then it switched to being Eurasia for the 4 years preceding this story. So she doesn't even remember that they used to be warring with a different
I have a theory.
What?
The other two nations don't exist.
Probably not.
It's
probably Oceania.
It's just Oceania.
Yeah.
Wow. Because even me, a person who's going into this thinking this is a show all about lies, was still like, well, they're probably not at war with East Asia, but it exists still. In my head, you told me about it, and I'm like, well, I guess it's there. But like, I've never been anywhere but Canada, with the exception of Mexico for a very short vacation. So every other place in the world, every animal I've never seen has been someone else telling me about it.
Or a picture, yeah.
And the only reason why I don't question it is because it doesn't seem like there's any good reason to lie about.
Well, also, you've heard it from multiple sources. That's why.
Over and over again over decades.
Exactly.
But if there were no multiple stories, and people kept showing me pictures of tigers, and it was the only one person that could give me that information, I would wholeheartedly believe it.
Whatever they told you.
If it had horns. I would be like, well, of course tigers have horns.
I've seen the
every
pictures.
photo I've seen has horns in it.
It's true.
That's how it would be.
So they do actually, from my best understanding, they do exist.
Okay.
From my best understanding. But it's possible they don't. It's totally possible.
Is it always referred to by Winston? Like, is it ever really shown by other sources?
Well, you see people from different countries. So they see East Asian prisoners, which don't look like they're different colored skin. They're larger people. Like, I think there are physically different places, and you'll understand a little bit more about why.
Right.
But she doesn't really care because the war isn't even really real when you think about it. The war, even if it is real, they don't know what parts are real and what parts aren't. So to them, it's unreal, right?
Okay.
So what he said was, history has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present.
All right.
Because that's what the party is. Whatever the party wants to be true today is true forever in the past and forever into the future. So the only thing that exists is today, forever.
Yeah. Speaking of the present, there's a lot more of this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I really have to take a piss.
Okay.
All right, we'll break for that.
Yeah, we'll take a break.
Oh.
No sugar tonight in my coffee. No sugar tonight in my tea. I love that song.
Oh!
Okay.
I love how the second I said, also welcome back, the second I said I have to take a piss, you and I didn't say a word for the last 2 minutes.
We just talked for an hour.
Immediately. It was just
we needed a break.
Absolute silence. And it happens like that between Bros Play episodes too.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be like, thank you for joining us.
Well, we have to rest, right? Because you actually talk for at least 40 to 50 to maybe 60% of whatever, half an hour. It adds up.
The only reason why I don't throw my voice out during this is because we're in a quiet room. Because when I talk this much in a loud space, like at work, I find my voice starts to hurt at a very short amount of time.
Dude, don't even talk to me about that. Anytime I have a second tech on site, so if people don't know what I do drilling for soil engineering. And anytime there's a second tech on site, me and him always talk a bunch, but I'm wearing earplugs and there's a drill rig going. So you actually have to essentially yell to be heard at normal volume.
Yeah, this morning, whenever I play Siege on my own, I use in-ear noise-canceling headphones, but not when I play with other people. And I unexpectedly had played with some randos that had mics. So when I was talking, I was like, I really enjoy this! It took 5-10 minutes for me
to figure it out.
Just to adjust to it, yeah.
Winston talks about how the party doctrine is... It is easiest to accept, for those who don't realize what they're giving up.
Yeah.
So being faithful to the party means that you lose so much. And the only way that you can actually convince someone to do that is if they don't realize all the shit they're giving up.
Right.
And that's why this world seems wrong to Winston, but it's only like a gut feeling. It's not a true knowledge that the world was once better.
Interesting.
And so at this point, he runs into O'Brien in the hallway. And O'Brien talks about how he really likes Winston's newspeak. Because Winston, if he ever writes like the head article in the Times, it's all written in newspeak. Which would be fucking weird to read. Because it would just be gibberish. But anyways, he tells Winston that the new version of the newspeak dictionary is coming out. So if he wants, he can swing by O'Brien's, and O'Brien will give him a new copy before they're distributed to everybody. So now it's kind of this like cloak and dagger game.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, so I'm going to meet you at your home. Okay, interesting. So he feels that moment was a major step he took towards his own grave. Because that's like one of the first true moments of rebellion.
Yeah.
And he's doing it with an inner party member, which is even more dangerous. Right? So Winston starts to feel this building up. And he has a dream in one of the nights that he spends in that room above the shop. And it's a dream about the last time he ever saw his mom. So I was actually going to open the first part with this story to give you some perspective on how brutal this book can be. So Winston lived in a time where the country was torn by war. There was never anything to eat. And him, his mom, and his baby sister all lived together. So
do they not mention his dad?
His dad, I believe, was already like disappeared at this point. Yeah. So Winston is the boy, so he generally gets the most food, but it's never enough. He's always hungry. They never have enough for the family. So one week, a chocolate ration is issued, and it's the first chocolate ration they can even remember.
Wow.
And it's an ounce of chocolate, which is not a lot. An ounce is 28 grams. So it's a very small amount.
Is that like a chocolate bar?
No.
Not even?
28 grams would probably be 3 or 4 pieces of a caramel bar.
3 or 4 pieces?
Of the squares, yeah. Like, not much, man.
Wow.
Not much. Maybe half a bar at most.
Would you like your caramel square today?
Or next week.
Or after?
Or on your wedding day.
Yeah. I've been saving 3 just for my wedding day.
So Winston, he's really young. I think he's only maybe 10 at this point. No older. And so he demands the whole piece of chocolate. His mom tells him not to be greedy. There's a huge argument. And eventually she gives him 3/4 of it and gives a quarter to his sister.
A huge argument over chocolate.
But you have to imagine it's food. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
So
it's also got temporary energy.
He has, exactly, immediate energy. He has 3/4 of the chocolate and his sister has a quarter. And then he steals the quarter from his sister and runs away. And so his mom is yelling after him as he's running. And I think he looks back to see her one more time, and then he just disappears to the streets because he felt terrible, obviously. So he spent hours in the streets just trying to avoid going home. And then when he went home, his mom and his sister were gone, and he never saw them again.
Fuck.
So it was the last time he saw them.
This book is just...
I know.
It's a downer.
Reading that part, I just I think I put the book down after that part. It was just so heavy. It just weighed so much on me to read that story. I was going to read it here, but I thought, nah.
Do you find that you, were you thinking about this story a lot during your reading? Like outside of the reading, were you like at work and you were just like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Because
like there's certain movies or shows actually. Like I still keep thinking about Patriot. It's such a good story and such a good like human psychology experiment that I keep thinking about moments in it. Like they're totally unrelated to life.
No.
It just keeps coming up.
I find it's the opposite.
Such an impact.
I find this book is so closely related to life.
Yeah.
Real things that happen in the world, and it's not hard to find like connections. And Julie even goes to say the same thing that Winston said. Remember how I said that he said the only thing that was your own was the few inches inside your own skull?
Mm.
Well, she says they can make you say anything, but they can't make you believe it.
Right.
So she has the same belief. They both believe that they can do whatever they want, but what's in your head is in your head, and that's your own.
There's one place you can never put a camera.
Yeah, exactly, or a microphone. And the goal is to stay human. The goal is to not turn into like some sort of wretched creature when they capture you.
A plebeian prole.
Well, you wouldn't be a prole. Because the proles are normal people. They're the masses, the huddled masses.
That's what I mean. Like a lesser being that's also a proletarian.
No, I meant you'd rather be a proletarian than a party member.
Oh.
Because the party members are the ones that are truly messed up. The party members are the ones that have lost their humanity.
They're like corporate Congress.
In a lot of ways, yeah. And it's easier said than done. It's something it's almost a wish. They're like, oh, we wish we could stay human.
One day.
And they believe they can do it, but, that remains to be seen. So they go to visit O'Brien together. And Winston is thinking about it at the time. He's thinking, if he's actually, just giving me the dictionary, how do I explain that she's here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this really is an all-or-nothing moment, and that's part of why he feels like he's stepping towards his grave. So they go to his house, and it's super clean. It's, nothing like what they live in. So imagine a world like V for Vendetta, where everyone lives in this kind of squalor, and then you have Chancellor Sutler, who eats real butter and, has an immaculate life. Same idea. And they go to meet him, and Winston could not taste wine when it was offered to him because he drank gin for so many years that his mouth and his taste buds were just mangled by the gin, and he didn't even taste the wine.
Yeah, gin's intense, isn't it?
Gin's pretty intense, but this is also a very ruthless version of gin. It is an oily, gross-tasting gin.
What's gin supposed to be like?
Gin kind of tastes like pine needles and turpentine. It's not awful. It's better than some people like it more than tequila because tequila can be really aggressive.
Oh, dude, first time I did tequila, I did a shot of tequila at a table with people, and I almost hit someone in the face with it. Like when I it was just like.
You say it like that, but I don't think anyone's ever done tequila without it being a shot. Pretty much.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's more significant because I'm not the type of guy to do something extravagant like that the first time I do it.
But there's no lesser amount you can consume than a shot.
No, but I'm the type of guy who's like, let me take a sip first to find out if I like that.
Or you would not like it.
Like the first time I ever drank beer, I didn't just hit it. I took a tiny sip and then a little bigger sip, and I probably should have sipped it.
I see what you mean, but with hard liquor, you're not supposed to sip it. That's not the point.
Yeah, I think I would have not sprayed it all over people though.
If you had tried it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I just thought hey, got a lime here.
That'll help. No, it
I
won't.
totally understand why people do it though. It was certainly better than no lime, or is it lemon? I can't remember.
Yeah, I believe it's lemon.
Okay, because I was like, I could do this without the lemon, and as soon as I hit it, I'm like, no, lemon time.
Yeah, it's lemon, salt.
Yes.
Was there another thing?
Maybe.
I don't know.
It is. I don't think it looks like salt.
What do you mean?
Put something on there that doesn't look like salt.
On where?
On the lime. Or no, on the edge of the... I don't fucking know. I'm not a drinker.
I think you're supposed to... You pour the salt on your hand, you lick the salt.
Right.
Then you do the shot, and then you do the lemon.
Mm.
I've never done that personally. I'm a big fan of tequila, but I'm a shots guy, so it's okay for me. But then there's the man tequila shot. And you shoot the lemon in your eye... You snort the salt, and then you take the shot. Totally opposite.
That is so fucking stupid.
One of my teachers, I will not mention which or where from, but did 2 of them back to back. So he was blinded because he did the one lemon in one eye and the other lemon in the other eye.
The idea that manliness comes from
pain,
overly stupid pain and destruction to your body is ridiculous.
Well, a man tequila shot is doing it without. That's the idiot tequila shot, but I do see what you mean. So, he can't taste the wine, but that's not really the point of being there. So, O'Brien turns off his telescreen, which is a pretty... So he can actually turn his off.
Oh.
Winston can only turn his down.
How does he do that?
But he has it's privilege of a party member, of an inner party member. So he can only have it turned off for up to half an hour at a time.
Oh, so even a party member is not really...
No one is safe. No one is above the world.
Wow.
Which is one thing that makes this story so unique. The reason they stay in power is that no one is above the quote-unquote law. Even though they don't have a law, no one is outside the bounds of the rules.
So they constantly maintain control by even controlling those who have control.
By controlling themselves.
Right.
By having control over oneself and others is the only way that you can maintain power. Because that's what always falls apart. People go, why the fuck does a king live in a castle and I live here? Right? So it's really neat that's... It's not like Big Brother is a man who leads the inner party. Big Brother is something the inner party constructs so that they don't have to be treated as a group. They can be treated as an individual.
Right. They're just people under Big Brother.
Exactly.
Just doing my job.
And each one of them will keep the others in check. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a scene when O'Brien asks what it is they're willing to do.
I love that you call them scenes. That's awesome.
But it is a scene, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it.
Okay.
Like, what I mean
Some
is,
people
like,
wouldn't. Some people would be like a section in the book.
Yeah. Like, it's not... Like, a paragraph is a medium to get information to you, but the scene is the idea. It's the thing that's happening.
True. There's multiple paragraphs in a scene, usually.
Because, like, time isn't freezing as Winston is thinking. Winston is thinking in real time while things are happening.
Going, yeah.
Right.
So all of it is simultaneous.
Yeah.
So he asked them what they're prepared to do. He said, it starts with O'Brien, and then it's their responses. Are you prepared to give your lives? Yes. Are you prepared to commit murder? Yes. To commit acts of sabotage which may cause the deaths of hundreds of innocent people? Yes. To betray your country to foreign powers? Yes. Are you prepared to cheat, to forge, blackmail, corrupt the minds of children, to distribute habit-forming drugs, encourage prostitution, disseminate venereal diseases, to do anything which is likely to cause demoralization and weaken the power of the party? Yes. If, for example, it would somehow serve our interests to throw sulfuric acid in the face of a child, are you prepared to do that?
Holy shit.
Yes. Are you prepared to lose your identity and live out the rest of your life as a waiter or a dock worker? Yes. Are you prepared to commit suicide if and when we order you to do so? Yes. Are you prepared, the two of you, to separate and never see each other again? And then Julia shouts no. So all those other things were essentially accepted without...
I will throw sulfuric acid in the face of a child before I separate myself from you.
From my man.
That's a weird, like, love song. Like a One Direction thing. It's like...
I would mutilate a child just to be with you. I don't even want to keep going with that.
So this is a rebellion with O'Brien, Winston, and Julia. Am I following?
Well, yes, they're the ones that are discussing rebellion.
A rebellion, yeah.
And
why does O'Brien want to rebel?
That part's not clear yet, but you have to imagine that everyone's motives for rebelling are probably similar. Mm-hmm. Not the same, but similar. And also O'Brien's servant, his name's... forget his name.
Right.
But he's also involved, and he is going to be their, like, person that they interact with.
Okay.
And I want to remind you at this point, all these people are still wearing coveralls. So Julia and Winston are wearing blue coveralls, and O'Brien is wearing black coveralls.
This is all happening like in
a weird world that does not... Because I always imagine them sitting there, hands folded, like... But no, they're wearing blue coveralls. How weird would you appear?
I think I imagine them looking like wearing dusters and stuff. I don't know. Because they're like all
Old West?
They're like rebelling, and they're
it's
in it. And they're just like, all right, boys, are you prepared to throw sulfuric acid in the face of a child?
But the thing is, this rebellion is a subtle rebellion. It's a quiet rebellion. It has to be hidden.
There was in history class in like high school, this one guy said, or the teacher says, and that was the year of the silent rebellion. And one of my buddies was like, the worst type of rebellion.
It's hilarious. So O'Brien says that he's going to give them a book, the book, as their initiation. It's a book that was supposedly written by Goldstein.
Oh, shit.
And it's like the book of the Brotherhood. So he says they will never know how many people are in the rebellion. They will never know the goals of the rebellion.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Do they discuss ethnicities and religion?
No, not at all.
Because Goldstein is a very Jewish name.
Yeah.
Very Jewish.
They definitely don't discuss it in those terms. I think Goldstein is meant to be a name unfamiliar to the people.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that there's not a large Jewish sect.
Right.
But that, I mean, when you think that they're in London and North America, that's Oceania. So likely there aren't a ton of Jewish people. But they don't really talk about it.
Because it kind of sounds like the place where they would suppress religion, because it would be ideology towards someone who isn't Big Brother.
That's the thing. I think any other religion, they probably weed it out, no matter what it is.
Any other religion? Oh, other than theirs, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what O'Brien tells them. This is what he says that their mission will be, essentially. You will never have anything to sustain you except the idea. You will get no comradeship and no encouragement. Finally, when you are caught, you will get no help. We never help our members. At most, when it is absolutely necessary that someone should be silenced, we are occasionally able to smuggle a razor blade into a prisoner's cell. You will have to get used to living without results and without hope. You will work for a while, you will get caught, you will confess, and then you will die. Those are the only results you will ever see. There is no possibility that any perceptible change will happen in our lifetime. We are the dead. Our only true life is in the future. We shall take part in it as handfuls of dust and splinters of bone. But how far away that future may be, there is no way of knowing. It might be 1,000 years.
So the intention here is to lay groundwork for what would eventually become a full-on rebellion.
You are legitimately sacrificing yourself to form the platform for future real rebellions, essentially. And like he said, we are the dead. You will be caught, you will confess, and you will die. Because this processing isn't going to happen in your lifetime.
Yeah.
This is not Star Wars.
Yeah.
This is a slow, subtle, like I said, silent rebellion.
Generations is what we're going to need to be dealing with here.
Yes. And Winston mentions the place with no darkness to O'Brien, which is what O'Brien said to him in his dream. Mm-hmm. And O'Brien seems to know what he means by that. He doesn't explicitly say it, but he seems to understand what Winston means when he says we'll meet in the place with no darkness.
Being the pyramid prison.
Yes, which Winston doesn't really know that at this point.
Oh.
Only O'Brien knows that.
Oh.
Yeah. I let you in on a little secret, though.
Oh.
Spoiler.
That's dramatic irony.
First episode spoiler. Dramatic irony?
Yeah.
What's dramatic?
Or literal irony.
Dramatic irony is an alcoholic getting hit by a beer truck, right?
Right. Oh, sorry. So it's literary?
But I don't remember what literary irony is.
Because one of the ironies...
Oh, when someone says something they don't mean?
That might be one of the ironies. But one of the ironies is when a character is unaware of something that the audience is aware of. So, for example, if you see a scene where someone's wife gets in a car crash, and then the next scene is the guy, and he's like, I don't know what I would do if something happened to her.
Yeah, okay. So that is literary irony.
I think it's literary.
I believe.
So like we know what the scene means.
So this wouldn't actually be irony because it hasn't been said in the book. I told you that because I know it already. Oh. But the book has not really told you that yet.
It's kind of like in the prequels for Spartacus when Lucretia's friend says, well, have you ever fucked a gladiator? And it's just like, there's this scene where you're like, oh. And then the very first scene where she says something to Crixus, and there's this, wait. Yes.
Spoilers.
Well, actually, no. Prequels are actually just filled with that kind of irony. Because you're
intentionally.
You see like someone like brushes Crixus's hair across his face, and it's Crixus. And you're like, ooh. I know what that means.
Yeah, but no one else does. It's true.
But the characters have no idea.
That is definitely literary irony. Anytime you go back in time, it's essentially unavoidable.
And there are shows that are so well written that even though they are not prequels, you can go and watch the first episode again, and as a thing happens, you realize it was actually written with the intention of you seeing it but you didn't
You
because
missed
you
it.
didn't know what it meant.
Yeah. Well, you may have seen it, you didn't understand it. You didn't comprehend it.
It's second time around irony. It is intended for a replayability,
rewatch irony,
rewatch,
yeah.
which is phenomenal.
So after all this happens, Winston and Julia start working 90-hour weeks in preparation for Hate Week. So they're working so much.
Pitchforks, get your pitchforks here.
They're working so much, they're sleeping at the offices. Like, they were just setting up beds in the hallways so that people could sleep periodically for like 3 hours at a time. And so at the end of Hate Week, there's this massive speech. And they announce not that they are not at war with Eurasia anymore, but they announce that they are at war with East Asia, which means they're now flip-flopping again.
Yeah.
And so the crowd frenzies because the posters were sabotaged.
Yeah.
Because all the posters are wrong now, right? Because the posters have Eurasian soldiers, but we're actually at war with East Asia. So the crowd was now under the assumption that Goldstein had sabotaged the posters.
They're adding apostrophes.
So they start ripping them down.
And periods in the wrong spot. They're capitalizing the wrong letters. They're adding
Not that kind of sabotage.
They're adding T's to words like can and making them can't. It's too much, brother.
So when they make this announcement, it's not really explicitly stated, but everyone in the ministry knows. They all go back to work because they now have to rewrite history. They have to rewrite everything to agree with the idea that they are warring with East Asia, not Eurasia. So they then spend another basically entire week fixing history.
They could claim that it was a typo.
But that's not the point.
Because it's supposed to be Asia at the end of it.
Yeah, but that just proves they're incompetent. You spelled it wrong a million times. Yeah, you have to change it. So after finally all this work ends, Winston goes to the room to read the book. The book. It's always written in italics too.
Oh.
And that's how Winston describes it. He says, the idea of the book is almost as if it were written in italics. The book. You know, like the infamy of the book precedes the idea of the book. So there's
powerful book.
There's two main chapters that are read. So he's reading in the room, and he starts to read chapter 1, and it talks very briefly about how there's 3 levels to every society: upper, middle, lower.
Yeah. And
so in this particular case, upper is the inner party, middle is the regular party, and lower is the proletarians. But he for some reason skips ahead to chapter 3. So that's where he actually begins reading the book in full.
Oh.
So within this book, like the book 1984, there's 2 full chapters of this other book. So there's a section where it's probably like 5 or 6 pages is chapter 3 of the book, and then another 5 or 6 pages is chapter 1. So there's a lot of reading where you're actually reading Goldstein's words, not even George Orwell's.
Whoa.
It's a book within a book. No. Okay, fine.
I'm joking.
Okay.
It's not, because Inception is putting an idea in someone's head.
Yeah, the dream within a dream is something that happened in the movie.
Yes.
But it's not Inception.
It has nothing to do with Inception.
It's reminiscent of Othello. Not Othello. Macbeth.
Oh.
Because Macbeth is the play within a play.
Oh, right.
The play is the thing in which I'll catch the conscience of the king. And they have a play in which a real confession is made within a play.
Yeah, it's like what's it called? Tropic Thunder. It's a movie about making a movie.
That's a good point. A movie about making a movie.
In which they are not making a movie.
That's confusing.
A movie about about people believing they are making a movie, but are
when they're not. That's a very strange concept. So chapter 3 is called War is Peace. And I think this is probably the most fundamental idea in the entire 1984 story.
If you wish for peace, you must prepare for war.
And that's what they do. So there's 3 huge superpowers, and they spread across the entire world. So the whole world is owned by these 3 powers.
Mm-hmm.
So constant warfare means that there's an ever-growing level of hysteria, right? Because it's sort of like when you don't get rest, your stress levels just keep building.
Yeah.
So war means that now there's a shortage of goods all the time, right? And it also means that each of these superpowers, if it tried to take on the other two, it would lose. So all three superpowers are sort of at this standstill where they can't capture each other, nor could they get captured by the others. So all three are stationary, essentially. And each one of them has their own self-contained economy. So they can support their citizens based off what's in their actual country.
Like France.
Like France?
Yeah.
France is self-sustained?
Apparently they have like a pretty high rate of self-sustainability.
I believe that.
From like an agricultural sense?
There's lots of countries that could. I know there's lots of countries that couldn't as well.
Oh, for sure.
But the fact that they're able to do that means they don't need to trade, which means that war isn't an issue. War doesn't cut them off from the world because they don't need the world.
You know, Fanta came from embargo.
You love mentioning
It's
Fanta.
a great story.
It's a great story.
It is a great story.
Go back and watch our Bulletstorm episodes. Talked about Fanta for like 20 minutes at a time.
Well, you talked about the wrong version of the Fanta story.
Oh,
and
that's
then
true.
the real version of it.
So yeah, give them the real version. Update them on that.
So what people will tell you is that Fanta was made for Nazis. That's not true. Fanta was made by a Coca-Cola affiliated. I don't know. It was a. They were. Yeah, I think it was Coca-Cola. And during World War II, you couldn't get Coca-Cola syrup in Germany because it was an American company. So obviously they're not shipping their syrup on over to Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
So a company who is normally making some sort of Coca-Cola-esque thing that required that syrup was not getting it. So they threw a bunch of bullshit together, and mostly orange peels. So the original version of Fanta was probably disgusting.
Yeah, I bet.
And the reason why it's called Fanta was because in German he said "use your imaginations," which is something fantasy. Fantasy meaning like imagination or fantasy, and someone was like Fanta.
Perfect.
So it turned into like probably my favorite drink, but it came from. I mean, it's kind of like how a lot of like really like the space race pushed technology forward hugely. When humanity needs to build something for death and destruction, they do it really fast.
Learning gets done. Yeah.
Yeah, like the atomic bomb probably wouldn't have happened as fast if it wasn't about ending wars.
It's true. But the weird thing about this war is that this war is not designed for conquest. It is not designed to win. The aim of this war is, and this is a quote, "The primary aim of warfare is to use up the products of the machine without raising the standard of living." So the goal is for all these people to work super hard to produce things, but for those things to not go back to the citizens. If the citizens get too much out of what they work for, their standard of living gets too high, and they're not controllable.
See, my theory is that it would be easier to say, to give people something worth losing.
And that's what our society is based on.
Yes.
Right? Our society is, we all have a level of comfortability that we're afraid to lose, and that's what keeps us here. But the way... Like, the only issue with that is that our standard of living is so high. We have access to free information, right? We have all these things, all these ways that we can fight back.
In Canada, like education is mandatory. Healthcare is relatively free.
But also, Canada's not interested in total control of its subjects.
That's the thing. We're given so much freedom that we're used to it. It's like that Jerry Seinfeld coach versus first class argument. You've seen what you can have, and you don't want to go back to coach.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we didn't have free healthcare, it would be this big topic. But because it has been ever since I was alive, it's never been a real subject for us. I hear about it all the time in the States. Obamacare was brought up every other day.
Yeah. But here it's just standard.
But here it's just like...
It's our normal living.
It's like, what do you mean you don't have health care?
That is what it's like.
What are you talking about? That's crazy.
So he even says that the world now is more primitive than it was 50 years earlier because they haven't needed to progress. Things have actually regressed.
Yeah.
And So he says because of machines, like when mechanization came out, it was impossible not to distribute all the additional wealth. Yeah. Even though we figured out ways to not distribute it. But that's beside the point. And that's why it needs to be spent. So the best way they found to control the proles is total abject poverty, to the point where they have no access to information. They have no way to better themselves. Mm-hmm. And war destroys the products of human labor. And even if it doesn't destroy the physical products, for example, if you build a massive military base that never gets destroyed, no one can eat it, right? No one can put it on their shoes. No one can give it to their kids. It's still useless. It's a shortage of goods for people. That's the big thing.
I think it comes down to the hierarchy of needs. That if you let's say like my concern with this apartment is like, oh, this thing is like not clean and that thing doesn't work quite well. But if there was a leak in my house, it would become primary. I wouldn't give a fuck about anything else.
Exactly.
And if like a window broke, that would become way bigger.
Yeah, you can't
have
worry.
Like systems of like hierarchy. Like if you were building a house and there's something wrong with it, that becomes a problem. But once you fix that, then you're like, oh, but this place needs air conditioning. Oh,
and
but
when you fix that,
like,
yeah. It's the same way that when you are worried about eating enough food, you can't be worried about how much you hate your boss.
Right.
So there's, and that's exactly what it is. By making them constantly concerned about the basic essentials, they make it such that they're unable to focus on other things. And that's the whole point of their war. So with such massive poverty and such continuous war, it makes sense all of a sudden to hand power over to a small group of people, the party.
You also have a lot there's a correlation between poverty and crime. So you now have this perfect excuse for things that happen. Like someone just disappeared. It's like, well, it's a dangerous place.
No, but that's not even how they do it. The person just disappears.
That's true.
Right? There's no, oh, they slipped and fell. Because they don't give a fuck what people think. Yeah. They'll just disappear those people too. Right?
Yeah.
So no one talks
Maybe
about
that was the start. Maybe that's how it first began.
Probably did.
They were covering things up by saying, oh, he was walking through a dangerous neighborhood. Shit happens, right?
It's just eventually, like Russia in modern times.
Right.
Right? People just disappear or just die strangely. And then one day, no one's going to ask the questions eventually, right? Because of the fear. So the only time when innovation occurs in this entire society is in the police and the military. So every other branch of this government believes that the earth is flat. The only branches of the government that believe the earth is round is their police and their military, because obviously it makes more sense to use reality.
Yeah.
But it's weird. That's one of the weird things that never really reconcile. He even talks about it later. He says, we choose to believe the earth is round because it is better for our calculations. So it's just like there's a lot of doublethink that goes on, which is so frustrating because it's such a weird practice that we're not familiar with.
Interesting. I've never heard that rounding earth one, but...
Well, yeah, that's a weird one. But the major issue is that the superpowers can't assimilate the people of another group.
Right. Because
it just wouldn't work, and the people in your group would start to learn from them and realize that all the same bullshit exists there, right? So realistically, they support each other, the three superpowers, because each of them is in constant warfare, and each of them uses that constant warfare to keep their people subservient.
Right.
So I like it to be sort of the same way a teepee is constructed. You have three sticks all leaning up against each other. If any one of those sticks was removed, all three of them would fall to the ground. Right? You require all three to create that power structure, and without any of them, the rest of it would crumble.
Interesting. That's kind of what the UN is all about. They're all getting together to make sure that one of them doesn't get out of line.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the weird part of this chapter, the part I really like, is that when it ends, it says, war is peace because continuous warfare is what leads to the state of quote-unquote peace.
Right.
Because to be at peace is really just to not be in turmoil. And if you're in warfare all the time, there is no turmoil. Everything is turmoil. So therefore, war, in its continuous sense, generates peace.
Your system of expectation changes.
Your definition of peace is different, for sure.
It's like, I keep thinking about, every time you bring up war, I think about the Pacific.
What is it good for? That's not what comes to mind?
Someone did that. Someone made that joke. They were just like, generating... In the Pacific, Eugene Sledge goes to war, and everything is scary and terrifying, and he jumps at every single thing that happens. He can't even do like basic tasks because he's so scared. And then you flash forward to like 4 years into the conflict, and there's just like gunfire going by his head, and he's just walking. Like, there's no reaction. At that point, the things that he starts to give a shit about are like staying dry, like having like correct food, and he's probably not even worried about food anymore. Like they just get so used to that. Like, well,
and think about the idea that when you die, you don't have to deal with the forest,
they're
the
also
bugs, the
in that
bad
too,
food, right? So there's the things that can happen to a human mind, and I think that's what this whole story is about, is that the human mind can be so twisted if you allow it to.
Yeah.
So the next chapter he reads is chapter 1. I don't know why he goes back like that. But anyways, the next chapter is Ignorance is Strength. And Winston kind of realizes around this point that this book isn't telling him anything new. Right. None of this he didn't know, but what it is doing is putting it in a categorical way. It's making it really easy for him to organize the information.
Right.
It's taking all the things that he knew was wrong and telling him how it all works. So it divides the same thing, the low, middle, and high classes. And it talks about how power falls apart. So, do I have the 4 written down? Maybe not. But the middle generally usurps power away from the high class, generally by enlisting the low class to help them out. So you imagine a dictatorship in which the military offers to overthrow the dictator based on the support of the people.
Right.
Then the military overthrows the high class, so the middle moves up to being the high class.
Takes over
and keeps the low back where they were, installs a new middle class. Right? That's how it generally goes. That's why everything usually falls apart, because if the middle becomes unrestful, they can take over the high. So that's always the issue. You don't want to worry about the low becoming the new high class, because that won't happen. But you need to be worried about the middle trying to move up.
Is that similar to the Tyrion Lannister the question he poses with a sellsword in the middle of 3 men, like one with money, one with religious power, and the other is a king or something like that? And he's like, which one has the power? Something like that.
It's a good question.
It's like, it's all an illusion that you say that. So he it's like a whole like discussion, like, so swords are where the power comes from, because that's what gets shit done. So you should say that the guy holding the sword has the power. Well, no, not really. It's all about who tells the sword what to do. So who exactly has the power? I like that, because that one actually has more, like, it makes more questions for me than, it doesn't really resolve everything.
It doesn't have answers.
He ends it by saying that like power is wherever. Oh no, it wasn't. No, it's to Tyrion Lannister. That's right. The Spider says this. But he says, in the end, power is wherever men believe it resides.
It's true.
It's not about where it really is.
Because the money doesn't have power.
Exactly.
But the money is believed to have power, and that's what gives it its power.
Only when the last tree is cut and the last fish is caught will you realize that money cannot be eaten.
Oh, who said that?
Lamb of God.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty cool. That actually kind of sounds like something I would bring up when we do the Lorax discussion.
Ooh.
Anyways,
does he say that?
Story, no, but in the story they cut down the last tree, and that's what ends all the production. And
speaking of Lamb of God, and it's kind of a relation to the way that these people have decided that it's better to live the dangerous life than to just kind of like whatever meander through a bullshit life. Lamb of God has probably my favorite line in any song. It's better to die quick, standing on your feet, than to live forever begging on your knees.
Yes.
That's probably the best
line.
I've ever heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this world, the cycle of rise and fall that societies have, that middle usurping the higher and vice versa, is believed to have stopped. The party is the last swing of the pendulum. So imagine the pendulum goes left, it goes right, and then it just stays right. Because that's their idea. And obviously this bars things like if the world died, if the sun shot out a massive solar flare or an asteroid hit them, obviously they would end. But as far as human life goes, the party is theoretically immortal and has been for God knows how long, right? So the book talks about how that political authoritarianism took over in about 1940. So
a long time ago.
Yes. Now my first question, because I told you that it's probably true that Oceania and all these other things are things. What if there is no Oceania? What if London and the countryside around London
is the only thing?
It?
Yeah.
What if it is like North Korea?
That's like
right? Because in North Korea they don't know what the world outside is like.
Oh, you mean what if Oceania is the only place?
Yeah, like there's just this
that's
city.
Like this.
Yeah, London, like Airstrip 1, London and the surrounding countryside is isolated from the rest of the world. And there's all these normal countries out there who are trying to help, but they can't for like diplomatic reasons. It could be.
Yeah, wow.
Totally could be.
That's like that scene from 28 Days Later. They discuss that they've assumed that the entire world has gone to shit the way that London has. Actually, it's in London too. Mm-hmm. And he says, the one guy's like, what if we're the only place? What if everyone's just looking at us going like, what do we do about this problem? Be. And then there's that scene where he's laying on the floor and he sees a like a commercial airplane flying overhead. And it's loosely implied that means, I mean, it's kind of answered in the second movie, but it's loosely implied that if you're stuck in a situation with that information and you've now lived for weeks in this situation where every person you meet is like, that's all I've ever seen, then that's just, you're going to formulate that idea. Like, well, of course, like in Walking Dead.
They assume it's everywhere.
Every person they meet, they're like, where have you been? What have you seen? Even times where like their whole objective in season 2, like one of the options is to go to Fort Benning. And then we find out in like season 3 or 4 that this dude's like, I was at Fort Benning and it fell. Like everybody has these ideas of like where like the promised land is, but it's nowhere.
It's really just hope, right?
The whole, hope. I mean, the assumption after like the Walking Dead's like in year 2 or 3, the assumption is that this is the way the entire world is at this point.
Yeah, but you never know because if you can't see outside, you can't tell.
That could be how it ends. Like what's his name isn't done writing the comics.
Oh, really?
Like he's still writing them.
So it could, yeah.
So what if it's just the States?
It could be.
I mean, they mention it,
or just North America, right? Like a body.
I think that like the guy in the first season mentions that like people in France were having the problem. But like, what if?
How'd you even really know that?
What if communication went down and shortly after Europe figured it out, but still doesn't have communication and can't communicate with a place that hasn't had power in a year?
Yeah, but it's totally possible. And so, obviously, there's so many things that they could be doing that they don't really tell you about. Mm-hmm. But what they mention in this book is that, like in the book within the book, is that all of the tyrannies of the past have been half-hearted by comparison to the party. The party is not just concerned with what you do, but also the thought behind it.
Right.
Right, and that's where the key comes in. They're more concerned about what you think than what you do.
Well, I would say thoughts are on par with the action.
In some ways, but, a modern society wouldn't say that for obvious reasons, right? That's why they're so concerned with it. And the invention of a telescreen was what made conformity completely ubiquitous. Mm-hmm. No one has a choice but to conform when they're being watched all the time, day and night.
Yeah.
Right? So, in page 215, it talks about the 4 different ways that a group can fall. And I thought it was kind of a neat list. There are only 4 ways in which a ruling group can fall from power. Either it is conquered from without, or it governs so inefficiently that the masses are stirred to revolt, or it allows a strong and discontented middle group to come up into being, or it loses its own self-confidence and willingness to govern. These causes do not operate singly, and as a rule, all four of them are present in some degree. A ruling class, which could guard against all of them, would remain in power permanently. Ultimately, the determining factor is the mental attitude of the ruling class. So what they're saying is that whether you fail, you give up, or you are overthrown, regardless, what keeps you in power is your will and determination to stay in power.
Yeah.
And that is what the party has more than anything. They want to be in power more than they want to be happy. They want to be in power more than they want to live in good conditions.
Anything, really.
Exactly. Power is paramount to them.
Power over
Power is
everything.
paramount.
Yeah.
And they even say that there's no economic depressions in this society because it's constantly a shortage of goods. There's no way to have a recession when you never have anything.
Well, yeah.
And you control the media and the Ministry of Plenty, so you can just say there is no recession if there is one.
There's no valleys without mountains.
Exactly. And then it also talks about how Big Brother was invented because it's easier to feel for a person than it is to feel for a group. Right? So Big Brother is a focusing point for people's aspirations, their love, sometimes their hate. But in that way, it's better for someone to hate Big Brother than to hate the party, because you can turn around someone's impression of Big Brother, but it's harder to turn around someone's idea of a whole group, right? That's where prejudice comes from, is judging groups.
Yeah.
So it breaks down Oceania and how its population is divided. So the top 2% of the country is the inner party. That is the high class.
Interesting.
2%, so a very small fraction of people. And that's about 6 million individuals. So that's still a lot of people.
Yeah.
Then the outer party is about 13%, making up the 15% is the middle and the high.
Yeah.
So they're the hands of the party. The outer party, they do all the work. The inner party does all the thinking.
So 2% of 6 million.
No, sorry, 2% is 6 million people.
What?
Yeah, 2% of the population is 6 million individuals. That's how many inner party members there are.
There's 6 million people in the inner party?
Yes, and then that's only 2% of the population.
What?
Yeah, so that
So
means...
how big is this?
Like 1.2 billion people
Oh.
in the whole population.
Okay. And that's within Oceania, not London.
Within Oceania, yeah, not Airstrip 1.
Okay.
So it does seem more reasonable.
Still, though, there's not even close to that many people in what is now North America plus the Western Europe.
No, there would be. When you think about it,
There's
there's
300 million in the States.
Another 45 million in Canada.
Yeah.
So let's say 400 million there. You're forgetting that it's like Venezuela, Chile, Mexico. There's a lot of big countries down there.
Oh, America is also part of this? I thought
Yeah,
it was just North America.
No, the whole of America. The whole of
Okay.
America, the Americas plus Western Europe is Oceania.
Okay, maybe.
And then Australia and Eastern Asia is East Asia, and then Eurasia is the rest. And I think Eurasia includes parts of Africa.
Okay.
It's hard. It would be nice if I had like a map, but they don't give you a map. They describe
Of course.
it. And then obviously the proles are the remaining 85%. And I've said that number before. So it is totally race independent who gets into the party. They don't care what your race, age, creed, any of that shit. They do not care. And there's no hereditary component.
Oh.
So if I'm a party member, your son is not necessarily going to be a party member.
Right.
And that's a big part of it, right? Because then that way, it's not like a king passing on to his son. It's you pass on to whoever is going to keep the party going, whoever is the best for the job.
Yeah.
And there's also very few changes between the inner and outer party. Very few people go up or down. The only time that would happen is if there's a member of the inner party who is not competent enough, and they would move them down. or if there's a member of the outer party who knows too much or is too intelligent, and they would move them up to the inner party.
This is all feeling very similar to Colony.
Is there only one season of that?
I think they're working on 2.
Okay, well, season 1 was good. And
Fantastic.
It does remind me of that. Because that's what it is. It's a totalitarian world with the technology to pull off total obedience of its people.
And the people within that sector have never seen anything outside of the sector.
Yeah.
They have no idea what's happening out there.
Which is a weird part.
Yeah. Fantastic show. Highly recommend it.
And they say it's very rare for the proles to go into the party, but it does happen occasionally. But the ruling group must nominate their successors, and that's the most important thing. So there's also an explanation of what it is that a party member goes through. It's not a coveted position. As much as you get certain privileges for it, it's hard. So a party member lives from birth to death under the eyes of the thought police. Even when he is alone, he can never be sure that he is alone. Wherever he may be, asleep or awake, working or resting, in his bath or in his bed, he can be inspected without warning and without knowledge that he is being inspected. Nothing that he does is indifferent. His friendships, his relaxations, his behavior towards his wife and children, the expressions of his face when he is alone, the words he mutters in his sleep, even the characteristic movements of his body are all jealously scrutinized. Not only any actual misdemeanor, but any eccentricity, however small, any change of habits, any nervous mannerism that could possibly be the symptom of an inner struggle is certain to be detected. He has no freedom of choice in any direction whatsoever. On the other hand, his actions are not regulated by law or any clearly formulated code of behavior.
Wow.
So they have to follow all the rules without knowing what they are. And they're being monitored on a level that would be, you are being monitored more closely than someone who works fast food at McDonald's.
With cameras and
managers walking around. So imagine how stressful that is, but all the time. When you go home, when you're at work, when you're in your leisure, when you're sleeping. When you're sleeping. If you say something in your sleep that sounds sketchy, they'll arrest you.
Fuck.
Yeah. And like, how do you even control that? So this is why doublespeak exists. Because it's really impossible to reconcile everything in your life without having a little bit of mental play, a little bit of wiggle room for you to believe and not believe things. And that's why that word is so important to this story in general, doublespeak.
It's because it's a way for them to...
It's the only way the party can exist in the first place. You can't have that much... Ignorance cannot be strength without doublespeak.
Right.
Because without doublespeak, ignorance is ignorance. With doublespeak, ignorance is a method of knowing what it is convenient to know.
Yeah, and by creating a language, they're taking it even a step further, which I've never even heard of an actual civilization doing, where they're actually creating a method of communication for the people that was created to control the people.
Yeah, to make it harder for them to express things, not easier.
Yeah.
So when he finishes reading the first chapter, I don't know if he gets all the way through, but when he's done reading, he hears a voice coming from behind the painting. A painting in the room that they're in, the one above the shop.
A voice?
A voice, and it tells them that they're dead. And
what?
Winston at this point, so he knows something's going down. And the words that it said in the book were, "It has started at last." So Winston not only knew he was going to be captured, he was in some ways excited for it. It was almost like he finally knew he would get answers when he got captured. Which actually happens in a lot of movies, you know? They're like, well, I'll just fucking get captured by these people and I'll learn everything about them.
It's like every Tom Cruise movie.
Every Tom Cruise movie, yeah. So then men enter the room, like heavily guarded, dressed men with trudgeons, which they're just clubs, essentially. Trudgeons, that's what they call those, like, police billy clubs.
It's like an onomatopoeia. That's like the sound it makes. It's just like,
Trudgeon. Yeah, seriously. And so one of them walks in, punches Julia, and just drags her out. Like, she's just kind of winded and out of it, and they drag her out of the room. And then he looks at the clock, and they have a 12-hour clock in this room because it's so old. But
Mhm.
Oceania operates on a 24-hour clock. So he looks at the clock, he sees the time, and he can't tell if it's 2 hours after he went to bed or 14 hours after he went to bed. Because the clock just says 9. He doesn't know if that's AM or PM. Which I think is kind of funny that it's like a shot at the 12-hour clock.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Charrington, the owner of the shop, enters the room. And he finally realizes that Mr. Charrington was actually a member of the Thought Police all along.
Oh, shit.
And that's where they leave part 2.
So do you think it was Mr. Charrington saying you're dead?
Yes. He was likely the voice behind the painting.
So he's just fucking with them?
Well, essentially he was trying to freak them out. Because, I mean, yes, he could have entered the room first, but part of it is the whole mental game, right? Like, you want your prisoners to be on edge. So imagine how freaky it would be if you're sitting in a room and then all of a sudden a voice starts coming from behind a painting.
Yeah.
Right? And then dudes just walk in. Like, yeah, that would be way creepier.
Fuck. That's a great way to end part 2.
Yeah, so part 2 ends and they have been captured.
And part of the reason why we're uploading all 3 of these parts at the same time is because we're not going to do to you what some fucking dickhole on the internet with his once a week uploads is going to do. Like, fuck that shit.
What I'm about to do to you.
I recognize that we don't upload a video every day, but it's not cliffhanger stuff.
Yeah.
There are some shows like True Blood, for how many seasons it was a cliffhanger every week. Come on,
every
man.
week, yeah.
That's brutal. I mean, you're not a dickhole. I mean, some of you are. You know who you are.
Thank you for joining us for the second part of this discussion, and I hope you'll be back for the third part.
That was nice. I enjoyed that.
And I hope the next is as nice as well.
Proletarians!
We are the proles!